Hello, everyone that's joining us. We're just going to let people stream in for a few more minutes before we get started. Hello to everyone that's chatting away in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. As I mentioned, we'll just get started in a few minutes. Okay, perhaps we'll get started just because I feel like we have a good group of people here. And obviously this is drop-in, so everyone's welcome to kind of pop in and out. I'd just like to say a huge thank you, firstly, for being here this evening. We really, really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to share space with all of us. I think it's a really, really exciting moment for the agency to get to connect with everyone and have this sort of broader discussion. Before we get started, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the space that we're on. And it's sort of interesting doing land acknowledgements in the world that we live in now, where obviously we're meeting virtually, right? And I've been in sessions where people are doing land acknowledgements for like the Zoom headquarters, and there are all sorts of ways of doing it. But for me, I think thinking about Brampton, I just want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron, and the Wendat, and the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. For me, in doing a land acknowledgement, I always think it's really important to kind of consider what that means for me on a personal and professional level. My own background, which is British and Swiss, and sort of my own relationship to the land in that way. On a personal level, the work that I'm doing, and in my role with the city, looking at how, as part of the agency's work, we can, work with Indigenous folks to honor and celebrate the fact that Indigenous communities have been on this land, for time immemorial, and sort of work with those groups, especially in a place like Brampton, where it's also home to folks from so many different places all over the world. And I really want to honor all of those different communities, including Indigenous folks. I'd also like to note that today is Trans Day of Visibility. And, I have trans folks in my life, and I think it's really important that we just acknowledge that today as well. Some quick housekeeping notes, and forgive me if I have to just double check my notes to make sure I don't forget anything. The first one would be that this session is recorded. It's recorded simply so that we can share it. We've had messages from people saying that they would have loved to join this evening, but weren't able to. So we wanted to just kind of record it so that after the fact we can put it on YouTube. Feel free to email us if you'd like a copy of it for any reason, but just there to have a copy to share. Obviously, you're muted, and thank you for understanding that. But the chat is very active, and that's simply just to make the session itself kind of go as smoothly as possible from an audio perspective. But please chat away in the chat box. We welcome all feedback there. Any questions that you put in there as well. Huge thank you to Katie for moderating everything, and we'll have a huge amount of time at the end, which I'd really like for the focus to be for that Q&A sort of session. So if you don't mind just putting your questions in there, we promise to get to as many as we can, and I'm always available for follow-ups afterwards. Yeah, I think for a quick agenda for the evening, now that I've done housekeeping, I'd really like to introduce myself very quickly. Following that, we have a message from Councillor Santos, who's the council representative on the agency's advisory panel. Then we're really lucky to have Navi Sidhu here, who is working alongside me as chair of the advisory panel. He's going to speak a little bit about their own experience and where things are at with the agency at the moment. Following that, I'm just going to give a quick overview on where we're at with some initial programming over the next few months, because we really wanted to hit the ground running and get things going. Obviously, I've only been in the role for about a month now, but yeah, I think now more than ever, it's important to kind of jump into action. And yeah, I didn't want there to be a delay in the sort of supports that I'm hoping to help offer. And then the focus of this evening, the Q&A. So we'll have a lot of time to just sort of chat things through and go from there. Yeah. I think firstly, I'll just quickly introduce myself then. As I mentioned, I'm Michael Vickers. I am an artist. I do sculpture, painting. I come from a family of creatives in all sorts of different ways. My brother's a musician. I have friends that are performers. Yeah, I've just sort of always grown up around arts and culture in every sense of the way. Along with my own personal artistic practice, I've been involved in the arts in different ways for well over a decade now. Along with working in galleries and museums during my undergrad, I then moved to New York, and I was working for a few different commercial galleries, along with MoMA PS1 and a few other institutions, and then came back to Toronto to do my master's in art history. And while I was doing that, worked for the Museum of Contemporary Art in education, community events and programs. I was the finance manager as well for a little while. And then a big chunk of the last few years of my life has been growing an arts collective in Toronto called Akin, which was really focused on community support, whether that was access to low-cost space, which is something I'm really eager to pursue here in Brampton as well. Community programs ranging from capacity development, so grant writing, how to do your taxes, how to create a business plan, things of that nature, to the fun stuff, museum tours, gallery tours, studio visits, performances in public spaces, and then working with groups that would like to do more art, but don't necessarily have a connection to the art community. So we would work with groups like CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, doing creative programming in that sort of way. After so long growing that organization, I was ready for a change and ready for a new challenge. And here I am a few weeks later, eager to jump sort of into this position. Yeah, I think that's enough about me for now, but again, I'm looking forward to answering more of your questions in a few minutes. I think next, Katie, if you don't mind sharing, Councillor Santos sends their regrets for not being able to make it this evening because they had a prior commitment, but has shared a little video just to say hello to everyone.
Hello artists, my name is Rosa Santos and I'm the Regional Councillor for Wards 1 and 5. It is such an honor to be appointed as the City of Brampton's Council representative on the advisory panel. I am so thrilled to be part of a group that will lead the startup and incubation of the new Arts, Culture and Creative Industry Development Agency in Brampton. What some of you may not know is that my grandfather was a conductor of an orchestra. I come from a background of music theater and also play a bit of piano and also guitar. And I also used to be a volunteer board member for an art gallery in Toronto. As an artist and advocate for the arts, I would like to recognize how extremely important this moment is for artists and arts organizations in the city. Your contribution as musicians, filmmakers, visual artists, performing artists, literature artists, dance, fashion, and so much more not just makes our city vibrant, but you also make our city better and have a huge contribution to our economy. I am so eager to get to work and start collaborating with Novi Sidhu, our board chair, and Michael Vickers, senior program lead, and also future panel members to serve the city's creative communities. Novi and Michael come with a lot of experience from their work in the arts community. Novi comes with 10 years of community engagement experience in the GTHA and has worked with numerous artists and local nonprofits. She has managed artist showcases and developed workshops to support the creative sector. And Michael brings 10 years of experience shaping initiatives from the ground up and having built a reputation as a strategic leader responsible for developing and strengthening diverse creative communities and programs. Most recently, Michael was the co-director of the Toronto-based arts organization called Akin. This new organization will operate at arm's length to the city, and it is a key partner in delivering the city's ambitious vision for arts, culture, and creative industries as articulated in the city's strategic vision and culture master plan. Initial agency programming will begin this spring, centered around grant writing, capacity building, and chances to reconnect as an arts community. And I know you have all missed each other very much. As a person passionate about the arts, I want to say thank you all for attending today, and I look forward to meeting with everybody soon. See you soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Katie. Navi, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself and speak a little bit about the agency?
Yeah, I would. Thank you so much, Michael. I hope everyone can hear me just fine. Hi, thank you so much for joining us on a Wednesday evening. Really appreciate people taking time out of their evening to connect with us in this way. My name is Navi Sidhu. I am the chair for the Arts, Culture, and Creative Industry Development Advisory Panel. And just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I come from a project management background. I've worked with nonprofits, a lot of government agencies in the past, and community initiatives, kind of on all sorts of levels, from municipal to provincial to national. I've worked with virtual teams and teams in person and kind of led them. And currently right now I'm a senior producer at Point Blank Creative, which is a creative digital ad agency, and that's kind of my full-time role. But also outside of that, I've spent a lot of time working in arts management with published authors, musicians, and nonprofits, developing art showcases like Councillor Santos had mentioned previously. But outside of kind of these professional qualifications, I wanted to talk to folks a little bit more about kind of my background, to give folks an understanding a little bit more about why I'm here and my passion for this project. I've grown up in Brampton. I've been here upwards of 25 years. I dabbled in my first artistic lifestyle when I started to play the trumpet in grade 6 and band. I've gone to school here at Sir John A in Central Peel, so I'm really familiar with the Brampton community. And I feel really comfortable about calling Brampton my home, and really excited about this opportunity that we have. I've spent, my time in high school kind of volunteering and putting on talent shows and culture shows, and that kind of continued on to my undergrad, where I did a lot of work curating some artist galleries, and I worked to put on some spoken word events and cultural showcases throughout my undergrad and postgrad as well, in my early 20s. And a lot of that was amazing work that I look upon fondly, because with a lot of that work, we were able to bring in people from, across the South Asian community to come to these events in Brampton in the GTA. And a lot of these events were really great platforms for individuals like, Just Rain and Lily Singh and Rupi Kaur to perform at their first events and give them their first stage to jump on. So I think that is very important, something that I hope that we can continue to do in Brampton as developing these stages for up and coming artists in Brampton and also in GTA to make Brampton an artist hub, really. So growing up with a South Asian background, I think most people have known that, becoming an artist full-time is not something that is always looked upon kindly in our community. Sometimes, depending on the background that you have very, very supportive families, and other times it's difficult, but a lot of the artists in Brampton, especially from my own experience, my partner is an artist who, works full-time and does his art part-time and really works towards trying to make the art the full-time job. And I think that's a really similar experience to all communities in Brampton and all artists in Brampton who are working full-time, but then also working to have their art on the side and developing that as a full-time job as well. And so I think some of these things are aspects that are really important to me and qualities that I bring forward into this role that I'm hoping to work with other development agencies and individual artists and artists groups so that we can kind of highlight some of the great voices that we have here in Brampton as an artist community and create more incredible artists like, the Habaya Mighties or the Nicole Chambers that are coming out of Brampton as well. So yeah, just a little bit about myself. I'm kind of volunteering in this role. I'm really excited about this. And I really want to make a difference. And while we're in this startup phase and in this growth phase, I'm open to connecting with folks and talking to folks about ideas that they have. I think it would be very exciting that we can kind of, in this growth and development phase, reach out and talk to folks and strategize together as we're, laying the foundations through this incubation with the city. I also kind of want to give folks a little bit of an idea of where we're going forward. What we're hoping to do is very soon put out a call for the panel, the advisory panel as well, which would be other board members. And what that would mean is looking for individuals who are artists, but also have, professional backgrounds and in places like HR, for instance, or finance that can help us develop out a board that would turn over to be a nonprofit board where a lot of the arts and culture programming and arts and culture spaces and all of that would be developed through this agency. So we're hoping in the next couple of weeks that we can get that out and talk to folks. And I'd love to talk to folks a little bit more about that if that's something they're interested in as well. And as we develop that out, in the meantime, Michael has this great plan in terms of some of the programming that we'd like to share with you folks. So we're really wanting to hit the ground running as much as possible and hear from artists and really understand some of the struggles. I know things from my perspective and from the collective of, artists that I have worked with, but I know there's so many different areas of the arts in Brampton. And I want to really make sure that we're highlighting all those areas and hearing all the concerns and all the positives of the work that's been taking place, especially during COVID, where it's a very hard time for artists right now. And we want to make sure that, as we develop this nonprofit to be self-sustaining, we are really looking at the community to help give us insight and really tell us where they want this to go. So that we can make sure that this is accurately representative for folks. So with that, I think I want to pass it back to Michael.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of continue what Navi was saying there, like a really important part of the work that the agency will be doing is working with you all to have conversations like we're having this evening. And I think it's really important to mention that this won't sort of just be a one-off, like we're going to be setting up monthly community connector events where there'll be a forum like this for us just to get together to discuss how things are going with the agency, but also just to speak about how things are going in the arts in Brampton, with a particular focus likely for each conversation, and we welcome others to join us. They'll be very open and very collaborative, but you know, again, as an artist myself, I recognize the last year has been a situation that presents just like unique hardships for us in the arts, and in ways that I think lots of other folks maybe don't even realize, especially for those that, you know, we've had exhibitions canceled, performances postponed, things like that, you know, and I think, yeah, I think just now more than ever, it's very like excellent timing for the agency to arrive and to get to work right away. So I can tell you a little bit about some of the things that we're going to be doing over the next few months. I mean, one thing I was really pleased about through our conversations with Navi and I was just that we're both so eager to get things going right away. Oh, hello in the chat. Hello, Carrie. You know, we don't want there to be this sort of delay where we're waiting for the panel to be formed, and then we're waiting to make a strategic plan, and then we're waiting to get into action. We wanted to kind of start right away, and I imagine many of you would also prefer we avoid things taking longer than necessary. One initiative that we're going to be starting at the beginning of next month, which is shockingly about 2 days away. So in April, we're going to be offering over our platforms. And I know some of you have asked about this, doing takeovers. So we're going to be doing takeovers of our Instagram account featuring various artists. We will be putting out a call for that, but we also welcome, my email has been put in the chat, if you're interested in showcasing your work and your creative practice. We're going to be doing Instagram takeovers, paid opportunities for artists to showcase their work. Thanks so much, Katie, for putting our Instagram handle in there. You'll also notice over the next few weeks, the culture handle on Instagram and the culture newsletter will shift over to the agency as well. Again, with the agency being at a distance from the city now, we'll be using those tools in our own ways. And I think you'll notice a real shift in that. Along with the takeovers, we're going to be doing a series of workshops over the spring and summer called Finding Funding, which is really what it sounds like, working with different granting and funding bodies across the province and the country to explore grant writing workshops, but much more than just sort of like grant writing 101, but really a little bit more focused, so that for those of you that perhaps have considered taking on a granting opportunity, but have been intimidated by it, like really working together through that process. And again, I'm always here to help you. If you have a project that you're not necessarily sure, you know, what grant would even be the right fit, we can work together through that and get you that support. So we'll be doing workshops with the Ontario Arts Council, Canada Council for the Arts, Trillium Foundation, and Factor, for those of you that are musicians looking to get some music grants as well. Along with that, we're going to be working with the Brampton Entrepreneur Centre at the end of next month to host a workshop that's really artist as entrepreneur. So I'm not sure how many of you have a relationship already with the Brampton Entrepreneur Centre. They offer a whole bunch of different tools and resources that, you know, I think there's often this misconception of, you know, the idea of the artist being something separate from an entrepreneur or a small business, when really, you know, the same things so often apply. So we're going to be walking through the ways that they can also support you in addition to the agency, along with a mental health workshop. Again, with COVID, you know, impacting our sector so intensely, just making sure that we have an opportunity to check in with each other and focus on our wellness. Then the community connector sessions that I mentioned. So once a month, every month between now and September, we're going to be having sessions where we get together with a particular focus and to regroup as a community. I think one question I would have would be, you know, well, what happens with that information? Because it's great to get together once a month and to all sort of talk about our issues and concerns, but where does that information go? That information will be consolidated and will really help myself and Navi and the rest of the agency team have roadmaps on where to focus our attention to make sure that we're actually serving you in the ways that you want to be served. Because there's no sense in us coming in here and guessing what folks need when we really want to hear from you. Along with these different workshops, we're going to be doing a bunch of different sort of public activations over the spring and summer. So working with the teams that are putting on Canada Day celebrations, Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm really keen to be involved with Pride, and also just different fun activities that hopefully, if things improve a little bit over the next little while, we'll be able to do outside as well, because I'm sure many of you are a little bit zoomed out, myself included. So we're really hoping that over the next little while, some of these can be done at a distance in a park, as soon as we're able to do that safely. We're talking about everything from public art bike rides and tours to all sorts of like gallery walks and things like that as well. The very last thing that I just mentioned is space, which is something that I touched on earlier. Obviously, given my experience, that's been a real focus for me. And we're currently working on a space survey where we'll really be asking you what you're looking for space-wise, especially when folks are having a hard time financially. The thought of having additional rent for a studio or a place to put on a performance or to do a screening is even more difficult, frankly. So we're going to be doing a bit of a needs assessment, really, to find out from you what do you need space-wise, so that hopefully in time the agency can function as a bit of a matchmaker between those that have space physically or otherwise and those that need it, and we can link the two together. Yeah, I think that is about it for a bit of an overview. And again, I'm happy to speak further on any of the items that we just touched on, but perhaps now might be a good time to open up for a Q&A. Katie, would you mind?
Yeah, so I wonder, so someone's just noted that I put the wrong link for our newsletter in the chat. So don't worry, I'll update that for everyone. But that is a great spot for folks to get sort of some of the latest programming stuff that Michael and Nevi are talking about. That's probably the best spot to go, and then as well as our Instagram. So I'll make sure to put that in the chat. So I believe we did have one question that came through just as you both were talking. And the question, I believe, was, I'll have to scroll back, but is this going to be for all artistic disciplines? And what will there be a focus? What is it going to look like?
The agency will serve everyone across the board. So I think that's really important point to sort of touch on, that, it's we're here to serve all of the arts, culture, and creative industry sector. And I think, if anything, I would like for that to be, as open as possible, because I think, especially in this day and age, so many of us are doing our creative practices touch on so many different things that it's not necessarily as straightforward as you're just a performer or you're just a painter or you're just a playwright. I think, yeah, certainly my intention would be to serve everyone and really, to be frank, make sure that nobody gets left behind.
And then another question here is this: what does that arm's length piece really mean? What does that look like in relation to the culture office that's been serving the arts sector for so long now in Brampton? I wonder if either of you can kind of unpack that a little bit further.
Yeah, Michael, if you don't mind, I'm happy to jump
go
in
ahead.
here. What the arm's length really means, and to be honest, that the terminology is not, I'm not the biggest fan of that as well, but the idea is that we will be a self-sustaining nonprofit. And so it's initially the funding, and to get us up and started is coming from the city. We really are looking to establish ourselves outside of those parameters as a nonprofit and working with different kind of scope than what the city currently works with. In the city environment, you have certain things that you have to, sorry, my alarm going off here. In the city environment, you have certain rules and regulations that you have to follow. And as this advisory panel, as we move forward and switch this over to nonprofit, we're really looking to find other funding sources as well outside of the city, and really looking to focus this in a more community-oriented way, where we can kind of establish ourselves. So initially, in the first year or so, we're going to be working with the city to get some of the more structural pieces together, but really quickly are looking to have our own way of doing things, really, that's outside of what currently the city has been pulling together, and just learning from best practices as well from the city. But I think the notion that we've gotten over the last little while from artists that we've spoken to, and we're also open again to speaking to as many as possible, is that we need to do something different. We need to do something that can help grow Brampton and the arts community, and that's what we're really looking to do, something that hasn't necessarily been done before, and while still building on the pieces that are being done really well.
Yeah.
Michael, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
I mean, I just nothing other than I completely agree. I mean, we would like to be able to pursue things, frankly, that the city would be restricted towards. We'd like to be able to do have a broader, more significant impact than the constraints that of the city, and to do things that are more interesting, frankly. And like the hope is that the agency is a place that people can come to with ideas that are more weird and wonderful than would have been able to find a home with the city previously. Yeah.
Okay. I think that brings a lot more clarity for folks, and feel free to continue to ask questions in the chat on that. Another question we've just got is around any opportunity for working groups for different artistic endeavors. And I think this person is looking specifically at research into the ways in which Bramptonians engage with public art, how they engage with music and things like that, and if that'll be a part of the work of the agency as well.
Yeah. Sorry, Michael, did you want to jump in there?
Or if you don't mind, I'll just be very,
yeah.
But I think that is certainly one of the outcomes that I really hope comes from these community connecting sort of conversations, is that in addition to these more open conversations, groups will form naturally. And, I think along with the opportunity to get involved with the panel, there's a real hope that there'll be all sorts of opportunities to kind of get involved in different volunteer capacities and also paid opportunities to discuss some of these different things and create these sort of working groups. So I would hope that each of those larger breakout sessions results in some things like that.
Yeah, and with the board and kind of getting that all pulled together, we definitely want to establish subcommittees and working groups that break off and focus on specific areas as well, because we can't, myself, if I were to undertake this on my own, or if Michael were to undertake this on his own, it's impossible for us to be able to be everywhere and do everything. So as we build out what that board is and those subcommittees, I think we definitely want to do that. And it's funny because Michael and I were just talking about some ideas of what potential research we could do, like what basic income for artists might look like in the city of Brampton, and if there's any research behind that. And those are some ideas that we have, but we're more than open to hearing other things as well. So definitely is something that we're hoping to pull together with subcommittees in specific research areas in the arts.
Okay. Just got a few questions too about how do you get in touch. So Michael's put his email in the chat, so anytime feel free to reach out to Michael. Instagram is another great way. Send us a DM if you want us to be aware of something too. Just send us a note or whatever through our Instagram at Culture Brampton. We've got another question. This one's for you, Michael, specifically. Given all of your extensive experience with supporting artists to find space in other cities, what kind of plans do you have to support artists here in Brampton and finding affordable or free space?
Well, I think the first step will be that sort of needs assessment space-wise. So finding out from everyone, what would your dream space look like, frankly, and and also in contrast with that, like what are your bare minimums? So finding out from folks, what sort of spaces you need, what it looks like, what part of Brampton it would be in, and then while that research is ongoing, continuing to do what I've already done over the last few weeks, which is really speaking with people in planning public real estate to find out what spaces are just sitting there that could be put to better use. And obviously, those conversations can be long and require a lot of explanation. I think one real issue, frankly, between the art sector and the real estate sector is there's a real language barrier. So I think a lot of the real estate world has sort of the idea of what an artist is, and a lot of artists have an idea of what somebody who works for a development company are like. And I think actually, I hope, again, in this sort of middleman situation, matchmaking, I can kind of demystify that for both sides. So I'm hoping essentially to be able to gradually access and learn about spaces that the city itself has that are sitting idle, that could be used, and connect you with them. But also on my own, connecting with more private development firms, so groups that are developing space in Brampton that would like to incorporate arts and culture into the new developments, but also make use of things that are just sitting there in the meantime. You know, yeah, I think with Akin, or, you know, it started with a small group of about 4 friends in one studio space and grew to roughly 50,000 square feet of space. And a huge amount of that space was buildings that were owned by groups that just let it sit there and do nothing. So I'm really keen to find where those spaces are in Brampton and you know, have us all activate them. Yeah, it won't happen overnight, but I think I'm already in the last few weeks have been really, I found it promising that there's, you know, there's just some opportunities to pursue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of work to do there, lots of unpacking. Another thought is around, will there be one-on-one coaching or mentorship, and how will that play into the agency?
If it's all right, Nabi, I'll speak to it, and I'd love to hear you as well. I mean, I have put my email in the chat box there, and I mean this sincerely. I'm happy to speak with anyone that would like to have a session of just sort of discussing where you're at and see how I can already help just after having been here for a few weeks. So please don't you know, be afraid to reach out, and we can set up a time to have a virtual coffee and just sort of, I'd love to hear from you about, you know, the good and the bad of where things are at for you. And link you from there to other folks that can potentially help support. I know that the generator program that Culture rolled out was quite successful. So we're looking at how could a program like that be developed again and modified? How can we learn from what was good about that program and build on it? And how can we, you know, switch things up where, you know, maybe things could have been better? But I'm very keen to develop mentorship programs on the individual level, but also for organizations that are saying, you know, we'd like to get from here to there, but we're just not quite sure how to. And, you know, I think part of that will also be organizations in Brampton that feel like they would like to pass on some of the knowledge that they've learned over the years. And how can we facilitate, you know, organizations, big and small, young and old, working together?
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in there too, Michael. I think one of the questions I would almost want to pose back it's just, in what way do we want to see coaching? Are we looking for coaching and mentorship when it comes to the business aspect of art? Are we talking about coaching and mentorship when it comes to, you know, developing an artist on a stage or a live performance? Or there's so many different ways. But I think if we're looking at it all together in terms of that one-on-one coaching, the mentorship, I agree with Michael. Definitely want to see us develop some sort of mentorship program down the line where folks can connect with a mentor, have a mentor-mentee relationship in various areas, whether that is, you know, theatrical or musical, or if it's artist management as well, and provide people with that support. That's something I think that would require some robust building out, and definitely something that I think both Michael and I hope to provide. And in the interim, we'll do our best to also connect folks, perhaps maybe not in a formal, you know, coaching way or mentorship way, but connect individuals who are new or want to build something up with other individuals that we know are looking to provide that mentorship or that leadership as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Navi and Michael. I know I see some folks here tonight that were in the Generator mentorship program too, so it's definitely something that we would like to be continuing. We have another question here around experimentation as a key theme for Brampton's culture plan. And I wonder, I'll ask this question, and we have another question too, just around the connection to other city initiatives. And so I wonder if something else to unpack is, where does the culture plan sit in all of this? But I'll ask this question first. So I suppose the root of the question is getting at, what ways will you support cultural entrepreneurs that want to do things that are quirky, weird, non-traditional, edgy, experimental? And what are we defining, as art, or what's acceptable or not acceptable, and who's that definition keeper? And just focusing on the importance of out-of-the-box identity and this unique identity for Brampton's cultural scene, and how will we be encouraging people that fall out of the norm, as this question asks, or things that are strange? How are we going to support that?
I mean, I would just say, well, like, weird is good. And I think I'm particularly interested in things that maybe fall outside of the regular boxes, frankly, of what is arts, culture, and creative industries. And I think that's we could have a whole focus group sort of session in itself on, like, what is culture, right? And I think, how do we move beyond the very Eurocentric white sort of ideas of what art and culture is? And I think that's really important to me. So I mean, I would want to see as much collaboration as possible with as many people that are working in the intersections of these different sort of practices, or things are a little bit further out there. I'm all ears is all I could say on from my end. Like, I think we certainly don't have any interest in doing things that are formulaic or dull. I mean, especially in 2021, when we recognize that this is an exciting moment for Brampton to push forward, not to be looking backwards.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that in the sense of it's all about being innovative, right? Especially in the times that we're in. And so we want to encourage that. So if there's anything that's coming that's new or unique, I think Michael and I are both in the place right now, and I don't want to speak for Councillor Santos, but think that, like, overall we want to be able to test anything and see how it goes, and see how the community reacts, and don't necessarily want to limit. So I think it's important that we remain approachable as we continue to grow and learn, and that we're open to ideas, and any ways that we can kind of help and facilitate kind of moving forward. It really makes me wonder what this individual had in mind, and want to talk to them a little bit more as well about that.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if this sort of ties into discussion around, I'm skipping a few questions, but we'll get to them, just around this question, is how do both of you envision the agency being able to internalize and apply equity, so really anti-racism, queer and trans liberation, disability justice, in the work of the agency, especially in the context that there's already been a lot of harm experienced in the arts community, the city being, this colonial structure, this bureaucratic place. What does that look like?
If I may go first, thank you, Anuradha Verma, for that question. I think it's a really important one. I mean, I think my first reaction is that I'd like to listen and to hear more about those harms, and learn more about your experience and the experiences of others. I think it's, really, that would be the most important step in my mind, is just like hearing about those experiences. I think also, as a straight, cisgendered, able-bodied white man, the way I walk through the world, I try to be mindful of the space that I hold and the power that I have in different situations, and how I can, if I have some, how I can use it to lift others up. But I'd really, also thinking about invisible harms, what harms are there that I perhaps don't even see, or haven't been thought about. One initial step that I've taken with the agency's work is that myself and many others from the culture team are going to be taking anti-oppression training and anti-racism training. We're going to be doing that in May. I've also reached out to a mentor of mine, Raniel Mujamar, who the city has worked with previously, and I've sort of learned from personally and professionally a lot over the last few years to unpack how some of those teachings can be applied in my new context here in Brampton. Yeah, so along with listening to folks that have been harmed, listening to those that can bring a different perspective to the work that we'll be doing together in Brampton. I have a really great relationship as well with Tangled Art and Disability, an organization in Toronto that's really focused on accessibility in every sort of way, and whether that's, you know, adding alt text and image descriptions to the images that we post on our Instagram, to making sure that, you know, if we are to build an arts hub, what do the washrooms look like and what are the facilities like there? Yeah, I think some of this work is going to be done like slowly and thoughtfully. You know, Katie and I have also discussed opportunities to consider, you know, an Indigenous elder in residence, which is a program that I've run with other organizations, but I really want to be mindful of the space that I'm bringing folks into and make sure that it's a safe one. Especially again, when we're considering the colonial structures of the city and you know, many institutions that are still working to kind of move the needle in that regard. Yeah, I hope that helps.
And just to jump in there as well, I think what's really important is that creating of that safe space. We are not, you know, trying to establish ourselves as an extension of like the city. This is going to be its own nonprofit, and the idea is that we, you know, don't kind of have those structures overlaying what we're trying to do here. And I think an important part of that is representation on the board, as subcommittee members, as volunteers, as memberships. We don't know if that's something we're going to do, but just having that there so that that perspective is within our structure, and that perspective is heard, and that we are ensuring that everything that we're doing, and it's all in alignment with our vision and values moving forward. And that can't always come from, you know, two individuals. Why it's so important for us to expand and to speak to as many people and to get a really great advisory panel together. But those are those perspectives that we're hoping to bring in here, and to help lead this organization as a part of the board.
Okay, thank you for that, Navi, and you too, Michael. I wonder now if we can jump back into this question around what collaboration will be happening with other city initiatives. And this person has asked, for example, the Riverwalk Revitalization Program. There's going to be an info session coming for that soon in April, I think. And then they're just noting that the Riverwalk Revitalization Program is a big part of creating Brampton in a new way, this grand strategy.
If I could just jump in right before, and Michael, you probably are going to be able to get into a little more granular level on this as well. But I think what's really important is creating, you know, partnerships. Arts and culture is not just like arts and culture. It affects, you know, tourism, economic development, how the entire city thrives itself. If artists can't afford, you know, housing, or if they can't pay their bills and they're trying to be full-time artists, that is effective in the entire ecosystem of the city as well. And if we do festivals and events, we bring people from other communities into the city, and it kind of affects tourism and affects business. So I think it's really important for us to work together with different aspects of the city and what they're doing and how they're developing out further in the city of Brampton, to ensure that the arts and culture space is considered as we move forward, and how it affects our artists in Brampton. Like we've mentioned before, we understand, and I know firsthand, artists who are struggling because of COVID, and it might have been before and after. There's a lot of, you know, factors here. And we really just want to make sure that we're looking at this not just from the arts and culture and what programming, but a little bit more also holistically. What other aspects affect, what brand partnerships affect, how does that all develop out as the city has its own plans in different areas. And I think I'll pass it back to Michael, who might have more ideas than me.
I think that was brilliantly said. I mean, I can just, all I can say is that I'll as I have done over the last few weeks, we'll just continue fighting for arts and culture to have a seat at every table and get into every meeting that I possibly can to advocate for it. I think, yeah, I mean, some of the items that Navi, touched on were, the agency will be an extremely collaborative organization, both with artists, arts organizations, but also other, sectors across the city. And I think that's the only way for us all to succeed, whether it is working with tourism on a bike art tour or working with economic development, as we all know that a dollar invested in the arts results in however many dollars for the economy generally. So I think we definitely have that perspective. A lot of my experience when I was in Toronto as well was working closely with other groups within the city of Toronto, including economic development and culture. All I can sort of add is just, we'll continue trying to be that voice for artists, along with culture, who are, do advocate. I think fundamentally the city of Brampton needs to be investing more money per capita on the arts. And I know that Navi and I are not alone in thinking that, and the culture staff, feel the same way. Some of the basic income items that Navi touched on will, the agency will be a group that is an advocate for the artist as well as a connector.
So we have a question now about the board. So has the board been finalized? Is it still being ironed out? Where are you at in that process? And is it monthly commitments for board members, or what kind of commitments will be on the board?
Yeah. So the board is something that we're going to do a call out for in the next couple of weeks. Hoping in April we can get submissions and get more individuals to join us on this initiative. Right now the board is a volunteer board, and we're looking at other ways that can take place. But right now it's super important for us to get the board filled up, so we can kind of, the more people and seats that we get filled on the board, the quicker we can get to a lot of the larger planning and strategizing that we're hoping to do with this. And the quicker we can kind of move from an incubation period to a nonprofit. Sorry, there was a second part to that question, I think, as well. Are they being finalized? And commitments. So in the initial process, it's going to be a monthly commitment, if not a little bit more, because we are starting up. Consider almost like a startup, a startup agency, or we're going to want to have more hands-on conversations and talk about strategy and visioning. And we want to eventually transition it a little bit over to more of what would be traditionally a strategic board, where we have, we meet maybe once a quarter, but initially we do want to meet quite often, just to get ourselves established. There's a lot of different moving pieces, and as we've probably seen from the questions today, a lot of areas to consider, and a variety of artists who want support and creatives who need it, and we can't just necessarily tackle that if we're not connecting regularly and being able to provide that structure and strategy for Michael and hopefully eventually team as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next question, we've touched on this a little bit, but I wonder if we just talk about it briefly again. What are some of the outreach strategies to gather or to get together the outreach community? And then I wonder if this question sort of ties into the next one, which is talking about that Jimish and Darshana are keen to collaborate with other Brampton-based performing arts organizations. And that is the agency scheduled to host networking events for artists virtually, and when, like how soon would something like that happen? So first part is around outreach strategies, and then the second half is how can we talk to each other as artists in Brampton, networking, and specific within disciplines too.
If I can just go first, Navi. I think on the outreach strategies, we're going to, in addition to taking over the mailing list that many of you, I'm sure, are part of, the culture mailing list, and all of the different social media handles, we're going to come up with a strategy for improving them and greater outreach. So what are, how can we use those tools more effectively to share your work? And also how, who is not hearing about culture and who's not hearing from the agency, and how do we make sure, to Navi's point earlier, that we, what are the barriers currently for people finding out about things, whether it's language, whether it's which part of the city you live in. How can we go bigger and better in the outreach regard as far as networking? I think those community conversations that we touched on that will start happening monthly will really be a great opportunity. Things like the space survey that I mentioned also, I think it's not necessarily going to be a case of arts organizations saying, oh, I'm looking for a stage to perform on, and I have to go and then try and find one in, within the city or the private sector, but there'll actually be another organization within Brampton that would be able to do it. And that's my hope as well, is not just linking folks to outside sources, but actually, once we start speaking more closely as a community, I think we'll realize, like, oh my goodness, there are tons of resources and tools that we could share amongst one another. And I think that will be a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. And if I could add to that, definitely, it's, I think, right now, using the tools that we have, like the culture newsletter and social media and all of that, to build upon it and kind of do some of that outreach, but also reaching out in different ethnocultural communities as well. And what does that look like? Typically, we'd be out in the community, but it's COVID time, so we need to strategize a little bit around how we can do that, but would really want to meet with the variety of groups that we have in Brampton, and individuals, and try to see if there's a way to get that message across, whether it's certain newspapers that are run within certain groups, or if it's platforms, smaller media platforms, large media. Like we're just trying to get the word out as much as possible. So it might be researching, looking into that, and connecting so that we can get into those little pockets, and larger pockets in Brampton, so we can effectively do outreach. And some of that might be natural, kind of grassroots word of mouth as we expand. So we're really looking to other artists groups and other artists, individuals, to help spread the word. And if you think we're doing something great, to champion that as well, I think would be super important in order for us to be effective. And I think that would maybe be one of the measures of how effective we're being here.
Yeah, if I can just add to that as well, I mean, I think we're very open to your feedback and advice as well, as we shift over the newsletter and our social media. I welcome an email sort of saying, these are some ways that I think the newsletter could be improved, or, have you considered this strategy for social media? Like, we really welcome that.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. We have another question about space. And so what are the agency's plans for building incubator spaces within the city of Brampton?
I mean, I definitely recognize how important those spaces are, because those are where people often do get to meet, right? And to connect, and then all of the intangible benefits that come from that, along with the tangible ones. I think the first step is doing this sort of assessment on where things are at in the city space-wise. And then I would absolutely hope that, eventually the agency can start considering plans for, whether it can support Creative Hubs itself, who it could work with to create some of these spaces. I think the first step is just assessing where we are at, and who has space, who doesn't have space, and what the needs are. But I would certainly hope for more of those spaces. Again, with Akin, that was a huge focus for me, was creating opportunities for people to connect in affordable spots like that.
Yeah, and I think our initial thought process is to see what's not being necessarily utilized, but also want to develop out to find who those allies are in the community that have space, that might be private space, that are willing to lend that and open their doors, because there's a lot of businesses and different associations and agencies and partnerships that are supportive of the arts. And do want to see arts and culture, and it might just be, tapping into that, and so we can, in a safe way, open that up to folks in different groups as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and we have another question here. This question is about an interest in subcommittees, and so I don't know if that's related to the board and the board build out of eventual subcommittees, or perhaps there's space for it, in these upcoming networking meetings that we're talking about, or even just in conversation with us at the city and Navi as our volunteer board chair. But this person is interested in community beautification, the things like interactive murals, more visual art that could be enjoyable community engagement opportunities, and particularly bringing art to folks who frequent busy spots in the city, like the downtown, and you don't typically have access to what we call, access to art, right? And so will there be space for this sort of project, this kind of plan, and how would they go about presenting something like this to the city or to the agency to make it a reality?
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I'm very keen to pursue as well, just as far as the beautification goes. I think there are lots of ways that especially in planning and in real estate, there'll be different funding sources for things like surface treatments or for, the fronts of buildings. And, I hear that and I think of a mural, or I think of an interesting, artwork. And so I think one thing that I'm hoping to do over the next little while is just look at which opportunities there are for artists to get involved in processes that frankly the city hasn't even thought, oh, this could be an art project, and I'm all ears if anyone's already come across some. So on that front, it's something I'm very, very keen to explore further as well. And as far as subcommittees go, I would think in due course between the board and these community conversations, there'll be plenty of opportunities for folks to join smaller sort of working groups.
Yeah, and it's funny because we were just having this conversation this morning as well of how can we utilize spaces that are currently could be used better to showcase art around the city. And I think this kind of really hits it on the nail. Subcommittee wise, that's definitely something that I think we want to develop into and make more sustainable. But in the short term, possibly over the summer, also want to look into and see if there's ways that we can use some of these spaces that I think this individual kind of outlined, or some of the spaces downtown, or spaces outside of the downtown core that we can have a mural at, or congregation spaces that, so just thinking off the top of my head, things like it was like the Mount Pleasant area where we can do, outdoor installations, and if that's possible or not. So really open to it, want to showcase more art across Brampton in public spaces, and definitely something we just initially started having conversations on. So if this individual has, I believe Carrie has more ideas and thoughts around that, would love to connect and see if we can make some of those connection points as well and help facilitate.
Yeah, if you saw me quickly flickering through my paper, it was because I was trying to find the name of a program that I actually came across the other day. So I can just mention, if it's okay, very quickly, is the Facade Improvement Grant. So whoever asked that question, that's something that maybe we could look at together, is how can, even just the way it's worded, facade improvement, you can improve a facade of a building with a mural quite easily. So looking at some of these programs that do exist, but maybe just haven't frankly been shared well enough with the arts community. So please send me a message. We can follow up on that grant together as well.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Michael. Another question that just came in that asks, Does the agency plan on extending reach outside of the Brampton community? This person, Cole, I am from Toronto, and when I tell my friends about the arts vision for Brampton, they're surprised and they want to learn more. And in order to grow as an arts hub, there needs to be more communication to arts communities outside of Brampton. And we had received sort of a similar type of question prior to the session starting around, what are those connections we'll make to the GTA, to Toronto, to Canada? What does that look like?
Yeah, and in short, I just want to say yes. Yes, definitely. I think it's super important for us to make some of those connections as we're developing out artists here in Brampton, and to ensure that artists in Brampton also are getting platforms in other cities, and across North America, across Canada, across Ontario as well. We can't kind of be in that silo. And I think from some of the work that I've done previously, and I've just from my own experience, have seen how we can make Brampton a hub where folks and artists from outside of Brampton also come here, and to perform and find maybe their first time on stage, or if we have, as we develop out what that looks like, our own festivals or our own kind of culture here, make it a real sense that other people from other communities in the GTHA or across Ontario really want to come here and see what's happening. But on the similar level, find out ways that we can get our artists on larger platforms outside of the city as well, and kind of make that connection both ways. I think is super important, and definitely something that we're thinking about strategically of how do we develop that and how do we make that happen.
Okay. So I've got a few questions that came in prior to these sessions that we can get to now. But if I've missed your question or I misrepresented it, feel free to send me a private message or put it into the chat again. Even more questions coming in. Feel free to write those as well. I see one now coming in from Nav. So this question says, so not knowing officially when we'll be able to get together again for large events or exhibits, are there any thoughts or ideas around funding special projects for Brampton creators? So podcasts, videos, albums, films, does that play into the picture at all with COVID?
For sure. I think if I can just go first, I think, there's no way that we're going to wait around for COVID to wrap up for us to kind of get to work with supporting artists and showcasing the work. We have, somebody mentioned earlier, Garden Square. I had a meeting yesterday looking at how we can use the screen in Garden Square to showcase art in various forms, whether that's a silent film or a performance or a still image or a video. But even going beyond that, like how can we perhaps record performances in different spaces safely and then share those things? I think over the next few months, there will be lots of calls for submissions coming out of the agency for these sorts of projects. I agree the light at the end of the tunnel exists, but obviously the situation right now, it's as we mentioned earlier, as soon as we can get together in person, we're very eager to do that. But I think we're actively talking about how can we highlight artists virtually in different ways too, that aren't just Zoom meetings as well.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on that a little bit as well, definitely looking for ways of, how if podcasts are being developed in Brampton or videos or albums or films, and they're Brampton artists that are being developed in Brampton, is there a way to provide funding to those sort of projects? And that's something I think we really want to look into, because I don't know if that's something that's been done previously in other ways, but it's definitely something that I think is of interest and important to see if that's something we can do, especially during COVID times. And obviously there would be parameters around that, but that's definitely something I'm hoping that with the board and with Michael, we can build out more and get to very soon.
I think it's something that the Rose has done incredibly well. Like we've seen they're doing, constant free live concerts of very high quality. So how can we use what they have and what they're up to showcase other kinds of art in different ways? And I think that's something we're very eager to kind of explore as well.
We just got another comment in just around that, what does that digital, like live shows for artists to show things remotely? And I think, like you say, Michael, our friends at the Rose they've got that technical experience, and it'd be great for the agency to work in tandem with the Rose, and we're really excited to do that.
Well, and how can those moments also be an opportunity for collaboration, like we've talked about, where can it be more than just somebody doing something on a bare stage? Could there not be an artist doing an installation in the background? Like, how can we use those moments as an opportunity to have 5 different artistic mediums going at once? I think that's really exciting to explore.
Definitely. So I wonder, feel free folks to continue to write your questions in the chat. I wonder if something we can go over again, we kind of touched on it, but the connection to the Culture Master Plan and the agency, and are they working together or not? And I know we've been talking about this relationship between the Culture Office and the city and the agency, and that it will be arm's length, but where does this Culture Master Plan tie into it? And perhaps for those folks that don't know what the Culture Master Plan is, just to briefly say what that is.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to it. So the Culture Master Plan was created in 2018 and was widely sort of celebrated and heralded for its like forward-thinking vision, and somebody mentioned like its willingness to consider experimentation and to consider some of the things that we've talked about, space being one of them. But that was in 2018 and it's 2021 now. So I think, there's been a gap, and a huge part of, oh, yes, we can send a link to the Culture Master Plan in the chat. A huge part of the agency's work will be holding the city, and I say this broadly, accountable to that Culture Master Plan, and to make sure that it happens. And there have been steps that have been taken forward, but for us, it provides a bit of a roadmap for things that we can explore and maybe build on. So for me, I think it's a brilliant document that now we really need to make sure is put into action. That would be my perspective on it.
Okay, well, thanks for offering that perspective, Michael. I'm just taking a look at some of the questions we had gotten in before. One of them was around this connection to the Culture Master Plan. Questions around space and affordability, which I think we've really touched on too. And I think a lot of questions just around how can we hang out together? What will the agency be able to just, casually have hangout space virtually or physically for artists?
Yeah, as soon as we can. And I think, but virtually at first, but I want to hang out with other artists again as well. And I've really felt that over the last year, because we all just feed off of each other. And we all know the kind of magic that can happen in a room when you put a bunch of artists together, even if it's a Zoom room. So as soon as we can, we'll be getting that going again.
Okay, great. Yeah. So we're at like about 7:45-ish. I wonder, Nevi or Michael, if there's any questions that haven't been asked that you'd like to touch on, or anything else that you'd like to say or ask of the community that's here tonight.
For myself, I'd just like to stress how open I am for communication and collaboration, and please do take me up on the offer to have a chat if you'd like to, and to reach out. No idea is too big or bold or too small and strange, like it really is, I think, a moment now for arts and culture in Brampton to kind of, consider dream bigger and consider what could come next. I mean, I think I was in a meeting the other day and somebody talked about arts in a really interesting way, where they talked about it being a mirror, a window, and a sliding door, which is a metaphor that I'd never really considered, but was like a really good perspective. The idea that, as we all know, I think in the 25 of us that are in this group right now, that it can be, a mirror for reflection, especially in a strange moment like this, a window into someone else's world and to someone else's lived experience. And, this idea of a sliding door, which I love, which means it can be an escape to something new and to something different. And I think how we can kind of apply that in new ways is really interesting.
Thanks for that, Michael. Yeah, I just want to say and kind of mimic that we're very open and want to have more of these. So if this conversation is helpful and or if people want to meet with us one-on-one and connect with us, we're happy to do that. I'm happy to do that as well. I think right now just connecting through Michael, and then I can meet and with folks as well. I'm happy to do that. I think developing out the next steps is important, and we want to try to stay as transparent as possible. So if there are any questions that do come up, please let us know, and we'll do our best to address those as well. And really are looking to establish this nonprofit as a way to give back as much as possible to the community, but then also make it self-sustaining eventually, so that we can continue to do that work, and it kind of is a cycle as well. So it's important for us, I think, to think like that and to collaborate and to build together. So if anyone has thoughts and ideas, happy to chat. And yeah, just thank you all for coming out and spending the last hour and 15 minutes with us. We really appreciate it.
All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. Perhaps we can hang out for another minute or two before saying goodbye. But feel free to turn on your video and just say a wave if you'd like, as before you say good night. It's nice to see folks gathered together. It's been a while, I think, that we've done this. So it's just nice to see everyone's faces.
Thank you so much again. We really do appreciate it. And please don't hesitate to get in touch anytime.
It's actually really great to see people pop on camera and say hi.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I know we're all muted tonight, but we're really looking forward to having sessions where we can hear everyone's voice and it'll be more of a two-way conversation. So that will
Yes,
come.
definitely.
And for now, it's just nice to see your faces. So.
Okay, perhaps we'll call it a night.
Bye, everyone.
Okay,
Bye,
good night, everyone. Thanks so much. Take care.
Take care.